Well, the first full day of winter meetings is in the books. Rumors are flying, and the Detroit Tigers have made their first signing of the week. We'll talk about that and more all today on Locked On Tigers.
You are Locked On Tigers, your daily Detroit Tigers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of Locked On Tigers. I'm, of course, your host, Scott Bentley. Today is Tuesday, December 10th, 2024. Thank you so much for making Locked On Tigers your first listen every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season off with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place just a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com to get started. Welcome in, everybody. Happy Tuesday to all. Winter meetings is definitely here. We have rumors flying left and right. We had some media availability with Scott Harris and our fantastic beat writers. He also went on MLB Network. So a lot of quotes and comments to dive way too deep into and way overanalyze, because that's our favorite thing to do here. So we will talk all about those, but we are going to start off with the Tigers' first, I would say, real signing of the offseason, right? I mean, there's certainly, like re-signings and minor league contracts and whatnot. But as far as direct impact on the major league team in 2025, I'm realizing that the show sheet here says Alex Cobb's fit in 2024. Obviously, that's only a few weeks left for him to have a huge impact on the Detroit Tigers in the year 2024. Alex Cobb is a Detroit Tiger, signs a one-year deal with Detroit. The money, I'm recording this, I waited very late. It's 11:30 p.m. because, again, I don't want news to break at like 11:15 and then you all wake up in the morning and don't have an episode talking about a signing that happened late the previous night. So I'm trying to wait late into the evening this week at least, because of winter meetings, and there still is no salary that has been announced at the time of this recording. So obviously I'd imagine that once that becomes official via the organization, and the Tigers in the Scott Harris era have been really good about just posting and announcing news themselves as an organization, which is something that previous regimes definitely didn't do. So I'd imagine we'll learn at some point this week, but it's probably not too terribly much. And again, is just a one-year deal. So honestly, the reaction throughout the fan base that I saw, at least, was negative. And I think we have to, as a group, we have to separate big picture from small picture. I understand the big picture frustration where we are all waiting for a big, exciting signing, right? Or a big splash, some big move that proves the organization cares about the momentum that it built and hopefully can swing into 2025 from the great magical run that was 2024. But Alex Cobb in a vacuum, just his deal itself, there is nothing wrong with this. I'm not doing a dance on, in front of the camera here. Like I'm not doing backflips. It's not the greatest signing I've ever seen in my life. It's not a huge needle mover, but the Tigers needed back end of the rotation depth, and they got a pretty decent pitcher on a short-term deal. And Alex Cobb can certainly fit that. My reaction, we just talked about the fan base's reaction. My reaction to this was fine. Like the word fine. Fine. Sure. Alex Cobb, great. I'm not over the moon, right? Again, this doesn't make me. I don't have a different opinion on the 2025 Tigers because of signing Alex Cobb, but I also don't think that this certainly isn't detrimental. It's not an issue. It doesn't get in the way of anything. And believe it or not, they can still sign more people. We just have to hope that they choose to do that. Let's talk about Cobb specifically, and then as the show goes on, we'll get a little bit more big picture with everything. He is a high ground ball rate, low strikeout rate, low walk rate type of pitcher. That's a profile that the Tigers have, I think it's safe to say, shown over the last couple of years that they are fond of. I guess that's the way I'll word it. Somebody, Alex Cobb's not going to miss a ton of bats, certainly not at 37 years old, coming off of a pretty major injury that he had at the end of the 2023 season, and that led him to barely pitch in 2024. I can't imagine he's going to be a huge swing and miss guy or a huge strikeout guy, but he's going to keep the ball on the ground. He's going to prevent runs at a high clip. He's not going to beat himself. He's going to throw the ball in the zone, and he's going to induce a lot of weak contact. He's not going to walk a lot of hitters. And I think that, again, for a 1-year back end of the rotation, starting pitching depth type of guy, you can do a lot worse. And I really have no issue with that decision and with this signing. Cobb's been pretty solid for years now. He's got a sub-4 ERA dating back to the start of the 2021 season. So that's 21, 2, 3, 4. Parts of 4 seasons. Again, some injuries thrown in there. And this year, 2024, was barely on the field, but has a 3.75 ERA over that stretch, over that period of time. Now, getting to the injury, we'll get a little bit more specific with it. He had a major hip procedure done at the end of 2023. It cost him most of 2024. And then even when he was coming back in 2024, dealt with some shoulder soreness, which obviously you never want to hear, especially when you're talking about a starting pitcher in their late 30s. That's obviously a red flag or 2 or 5 or 7 or 10. And then also had some minor injuries like blisters and a fingernail problem, like some stuff that's obviously not going to impact him beyond this season. So that's the profile. That's what we're dealing with here. That is who the Tigers have brought in for some rotation help. He was an all-star in 2023. You look at the stat line in 2023 and you go, wow, why was he an all-star this season? Was this like the Giants' only good player? No, it's a first half, second half thing. You got to split the season in half. He had an ERA over 5 after the all-star break, but on the day of the all-star game had a 2.9 and was dealing. You gotta dig back in your memory bank and remember how good he was. He was a hot topic of trade conversation. He was widely talked about as one of the more successful signings of the previous offseason or 2, whenever he was up for contract more recently than that. But had a really good first half in 2023. So yeah, like overall, as far as his fit in here and his fit for the Tigers in 2025, he will be the 4th or 5th starter, I'd imagine, in the rotation. He will hopefully, if he stays healthy, eat some innings, and he will have a sub-4 ERA in doing so. That's fine. That's fine. Look, if it comes out tomorrow that they paid the dude, $35 million over a year, then yeah, I'll have an issue with it. But again, we really have to separate big picture from this signing in a vacuum. Is it exciting? Not really. Is it still something that I'm totally fine with the Tigers adding? Yes, very much so. Again, my reaction to this news was fine. Fine. You needed some starting pitching depth. This is a cheap short-term option. He could actually be pretty good, especially when paired with Feder and London, Nieves, etc. This is a profile that the Tigers have really liked over the last couple of years and that they have worked a lot with. I see no reason why this can't be a really effective signing and why he can't pitch some pretty meaningful innings for the Tigers in the year 2025. Okay? Now, a lot of other news came out of this. We'll kind of put a bow on the Alex Cobb conversation, and then we will move into first base, which for whatever reason was a very hot topic of conversation for the Detroit Tigers and Scott Harris at winter meetings on Monday. We'll talk about that and more right after this. Going to talk to you today about our friends over at FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to make bets in the same place where you can check all of your stats. It is the best website out there. So you get a hunch in the middle of a game. You can check out the latest stats, you live play-by-play, and so much more on that same page where you will place all of your bets. So just visit FanDuel.com to join today, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, everybody, welcome back here. Segment 2 of Locked On Tigers. Appreciate y'all for tuning in, as always, making us your first listen every single day. Shout out to the everydayers that do tune in every day. We will, of course, be back tomorrow recapping day 2. Well, I don't know. I counted Sunday as day 0. Monday is day 1. Tuesday is day 2. That's kind of how you could count Sunday as day 1 and then just move chronologically that way. Either way, tomorrow's episode, every episode this week, will be about the exciting drama and news and notes surrounding winter meetings. So just to put, again, a final kind of bow on the Alex Cobb conversation, saw some people saying that this was Kenta Maeda 2.0. I mean, maybe. Like, I hope not. Obviously, I'm sure we all hope not. The difference is 1-year deal versus 2-year deal. If Alex Cobb ends up having an ERA over 5 or over 6 or over 7, like Maeda did at different points this year, then you can just kind of count your losses. It's a very, very low risk deal, which I think is also to give credit to the fans that are frustrated with this. I think that's also probably the issue some people have with it, is it's yet another low risk deal in a long line of low risk deals. And this news of Alex Cobb also comes with the pairing of a report from Jon Morosi stating that the Tigers have interest in Paul Goldschmidt, who is pushing 40 and did not have nearly as good of a year as we are used to from him this past season. So let's transition into that conversation at first base. Really funny. I got both notifications almost at the exact same time. One was from Evan Petzold of the Freep, and one was from Jon Morosi. And Evans said, was a quote from Scott Harris that said, basically, amongst other things, the exact quote in there was, "We got to stick with him," in talking about Spencer Torkelson and talking about how they want to help him improve and get better. And there is a literal quote in there that says, "We've got to stick with him." And less than 60 seconds later, John Paul Morosi says that the Tigers have expressed interest in Paul Goldschmidt. So what does that mean? We talked about Goldie a little bit, I want to say 2 weeks ago now. Time all blends together sometimes. Man, look, if you want to debate Torkelson or Goldschmidt at this point in his career, I certainly there's an argument for bring in Goldie, give him a 1-year deal, and see if Torkelson can maybe, I guess, learn some stuff under him. I guess Goldschmidt's OPS was barely over 700 this year, man. Like he took a major step back. He was really bad for the first 2 months of the season, and then recovered, and then was kind of choppy. Like he didn't just recover and was great the rest of the season. Like it was a constant up and down. As I said when we broke this down a lot more in depth a couple of weeks ago, I'm not in love with the idea of Goldschmidt being a Detroit Tiger. I would be fine if they passed on that opportunity. Now, he still hit over 20 home runs this year, and that's something that this team really wants. And he's a righty bat, which is something that this team really wants. But there's just a lot of reports that came out on Monday that all contradict each other, all of them. Okay, so we're going to try to navigate our way through all of these reports, and I'll tell you kind of where I stand at the end of it. So we have the Torkelson comment, which is we have to stick with him, and that's straight from the president of baseball operations. Then you have Jon Morosi, who's just kind of doing what John Morosi does and just saying that every team is interested in everybody and mentions that the Tigers are interested in Goldschmidt. Then you have, from the same media availability where he's talking about Torkelson, you have all of our beat writers reporting that Colt Keith and Justyn-Henry Malloy are getting reps at first base throughout the winter. They're working at first base and they're training and their programs over the winter, and they will come into spring training, hopefully able to play some first base. Well, we can't have 5 first basemen, dog. So what is it, right? My biggest takeaway from this is actually the exact opposite as what I think some people's were when they first read the Keith and Malloy news. I think that this actually means that there is no chance that Justyn-Henry Malloy and Colt Keith are going to be like the opening day first baseman in 2025. That is not how I interpreted this news at all. Now, could I be wrong? I've been wrong plenty in my life and certainly on this show. That absolutely I have, and I'll always be the first to admit that. But that's not how I interpreted this. I interpret this as AJ Hinch continuing to do what AJ Hinch does. And that is, I want as much positional versatility as I possibly can. And we saw why down the stretch. And not only did it work in the pitching department with the whole pitching chaos thing, but it worked very well with lineup management and what he was able to do with, pinch hitters and forcing and kind of playing chess with the opposing manager and really forcing the hand and getting situations he wants late in games where he can go to an Andy Ibanez or a Kerry Carpenter off the bench. And I think that is my biggest takeaway from all of this, is that Colt Keith and Justyn-Henry Malloy are going to play first base for the Tigers in 2025 at some points. They are. But I don't think that either is going to take the job from Torkelson, at least at the beginning of the 2025 season. If Tork is batting, 150 and striking out a bunch and playing bad defense again, and Colt Keith has taken some huge step, or Justyn-Henry Malloy is somehow magically a Gold Glover over at first base, even though he's been well below average to just bad at every other position he's played defensively, then yes, they're going to take the job, and that's going to be that. But I don't, that's not how I interpret it on December 10th. That's all I'm saying. As far as Goldschmidt goes, again, we talked about it a few weeks ago. I really don't want to be in a position where I have to pick between Paul Goldschmidt in 2025 at, pushing 40 years old coming off the season he did, and Spencer Torkelson, given what he's done so far in his career. Like that's not awesome. That's I don't know. I don't view that as like a super optimistic view of how I think first base is going to look this upcoming year. But again, Goldschmidt does check boxes, and I can't imagine he's going to be too terribly expensive, which is unfortunately probably why the Tigers have expressed some interest in him. Because it seems like, and look, again, I would love to be wrong, and I would love to come on here in 2 weeks and talk about how, it was hilarious that, that me and others thought that they were just going to sign lesser expensive free agents and whatnot, and it's awesome, and GM speak is hilarious, and we got fooled. And I don't know, clearly I'm still working through a lot of my thoughts and feelings and emotions in regards to how what we're hearing here. I think the other thing that comes into play, and the reason why I bring up the names that the Tigers have been rumored to not being the bigger names on the market, is because in this same media availability, Scott Harris made a comment where he said they have been in contact with a lot of agents and a lot of camps on players, but, quote, the prices are staggering so far in free agency. Again, I'll reiterate and be the broken record for the third time. Would love to be wrong. Would love for them to go out and hash out some bigger money on somebody, and we can come on here and talk about how exciting that is. But that definitely does sound like we're kind of warming up to a reason to, maybe justify not spending or going out and getting somebody here as the winter goes along. So we will see. We will see. There's a lot more comments that were made And I want to get into all of those. So we will do that right after this. All right, everybody, welcome back. Your third and final segment of Locked On Tigers. Appreciate y'all for tuning in as always. Scott Harris brought up Kenta Maeda, and it sounds like his winter is going to be a lot better than his previous off seasons. He was, right when he came in, Evan Petzold was all over it and did a great job of talking about how he's not a guy that usually had a very, demanding, I guess I'll call it, off-season program, like as far as throwing and working out and lifting goes. And at one point in his career, I don't know if it was as recent as last year, but he didn't even throw until like right before, like he threw one time and then would come into spring training. And when he was younger, obviously that worked for him and there was no issue. Last year it didn't. And so there is much more contact between him and the front office. And obviously he's under contract throughout the winter instead of being signed as a free agent. So there's just, a whole year of working with him and whatnot. And it sounds like they are going to be much more diligent about his offseason throwing program and workout routine and whatnot. And there's still some hope, apparently, between Scott Harris and the front office that he could be in the mix for a starting pitching job. Honestly, my reaction to that is just like, I don't really care what the quotes are. Like I need to see it to believe it. Just because he says that on December 10th in no way, shape or form means that I actually believe that that's a possibility. And they're literally signed a starting pitcher today. So I'm not sure they're very confident that that's a thing either. But we will see what happens with that. And we can hope, obviously. Best case scenario is everybody's good, right? I mean, we can complain about it as much as we want. But at the end of the day, I would love Kenta Maeda to bounce back and pitch like he did when he was like a Dodger or a Twin after the injury. So we'll see what happens with that. I feel like I've said that about a billion times this episode. I apologize. Jace Young was also a topic of conversation. He's going to be just because he's a third baseman, and that's the position that everybody wants the Tigers to go and get this winter. He went under a. That's not what I was trying to say. I guess he had a procedure done on his right wrist. I don't know why I was trying to make under work so well into that sentence. Jace Young had a procedure done in his right wrist right after the season ended. And Scott Harris mentioned that he is also in a position where Jace Young intends to compete for playing time this upcoming season. I think, he also mentioned, to be fair to him, that these situations can change very quickly. If there's one trade or free agent move that is made, then all of a sudden, maybe he's not thinking that, but they mentioned that he'll be worked at second base, DH, and third base this spring training. So we'll see what happens. Dang it, I said it again. I was going to say we'll see what happens there. Look, we talked about Jace Young as well about a week ago, and I think that I am still optimistic that Jace Young can be a good major league hitter. In the same breath, I will be very disappointed if the plan is just give him the reins completely every day at third base, or give him and Veerling the keys, just stick with what we have in-house at third base this year. That is not something that I am in favor of going into 2025, as much as I still want to see if Jace Young will work out at the next level. I think we need more of a surefire thing over there. So interesting comments, to say the least. There also mentioned Jackson Jobe. Hilarious that we even have to talk about this quote, because this means literally nothing. But said Jackson Jobe is a mainstay, or he expects Jackson Jobe to be a mainstay in the Tigers rotation, but he's not sure when. Same. Me too, man. I'm sure that you, the listener, are hoping for the same thing. I think that's probably what every single person that knows who Jackson Jobe is probably thinks about Jackson Jobe this upcoming year, is that he'll be pitching at some point, but we're not sure when. As I said earlier, I don't think he's going to make the roster on opening day. I would love for him to. I love him, and I hope that he is everything that he is cracked up to be. He's got the stuff to be one of the best pitchers in this organization. I just think they're going to really, really, really go after starting pitching depth And Scott Harris mentioned how they want him to get better at strike throwing and some other things there before they are ready to just hand over the keys of a rotation spot. So we'll see what happens there, but I am not holding my breath on him being on the opening day roster. No plans to add a catcher was brought up. I have no issue with that. I like the catching tandem we have. Is it the best in baseball? No. Is it some elite tandem that is going to, instill fear into other teams necessarily? No, but both of them are good defenders and have the potential to be good hitters. Now, I think that they need catching depth. I don't think that you can just roll in there with these two and just expect it all to be fantastic. No injuries, no slumps, no anything. But I think that the plan, ideally, for this organization going forward is that those two are the catchers for the next 3+ years. And that means that Jake Rogers is going to have to bounce back offensively and hit closer to what he did in 2023. And it means Dylan Dingler is going to have to hit, period, at the major league level, which we have not seen him do on even a remotely consistent basis up to this point in his career. So I'm fine with it. I am okay with them not spending the budget and the whatever financial restrictions are placed on the front office to bring in and use those resources to bring in a catcher. I think there's much bigger fish to fry and much bigger team needs. I'm okay with not adding a catcher, but we will. Dang it! Why do I keep saying that? We will see what happens. Why? I mean, like we will, right? Like not wrong technically, but why do I keep saying that? I guess it's just like my first thought after every single one of these comments is like, yeah, we'll see, dude. I don't know. Wild. That's pretty much it for Tigers land. As far as rest of baseball talks go, obviously there was a couple of signings made on Monday. There was a couple of really wild rumors as well. One was that Carlos Correa may be on the move and the Twins may be open to shopping him. This is a team that ever since the Diamond Sports deal fell through with Minnesota, that they have just actively tried to plummet their payroll. And Carlos Correa makes a lot of money. And so that obviously is going to affect the Detroit Tigers and what happens, anything that happens in the division. We'll see. I have a hard time believing they're going to have anybody really chomping at the bit to bring in somebody who was rejected by two different team doctors and whose contract stipulations are very, revolving around him reaching a certain amount of at-bats and whatnot. Like it's just, I don't know. It's a weird situation. There's been a lot of injury stuff with him lately. I can't imagine it getting a lot better. I don't know. That's going to be a really interesting situation to follow. And then Kyle Tucker, no pun intended, completely out of left field. I guess he's kind of a right fielder more, but like you get the joke I was kind of going for there. Completely out of nowhere. To me, I don't think there is any world in which they trade Kyle Tucker if they re-sign Bregman. So to me, this is kind of laying the foundation of, okay, Bregman's our number one priority, speaking as if I were the Astros, obviously. If we get him, then the core stays together. We're making another run at it, no problem. If they lose Bregman, then maybe they look around and there was also a report about Framber Valdez, maybe trading him. Then maybe you could see some assets on the move. But he is so good, man. Kyle Tucker is one of the best players in baseball, legitimately. I cannot fathom at his age that they would be really chomping at the bit trying to offload a player like that. So we'll keep an eye on that as well. The MLB draft lottery is Tuesday, and your Detroit Tigers are not a part of it because, I don't know if you heard, they made the playoffs in 2024, and playoff teams are not a part of the lottery. So we get to sit back, relax, and watch and see who wins this year's MLB draft lottery. Going to be an interesting one, to say the least. I think that's everything I got. Again, as far as Alex Cobb, we'll end the show with that because that's obviously the biggest news in the organization. Again, I'm fine with it. I'm really fine with it, man. This is not going to make or break 2025. If this is the biggest move that the Tigers make this offseason, then yes, I will be just as mad as quite a lot of you already seem to be, at least from some of the people I've seen on the internet, which is always a dangerous game to play. But I will be just as angry as everyone else if this is the big name of the offseason. But there has been no say that this is like the biggest or only signing they're going to make. And Alex Cobb's been pretty darn solid as a like middle to back end rotation starter for the last 4 years. And I think with this pitching coaching staff, they can probably get the most out of him, just like they got the most out of Lorenzen and Flaherty, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that this is pretty good value. Hopefully, we'll see what the contract is later this week, I'm sure. But I really have no issue with this. I'm totally fine with it. And yeah, I hope that we can get through a season with a healthy rotation. If we could just hit game 162 with 5 healthy starting pitchers, I think that would be the first time that's happened since like before COVID, legitimately. Like I feel like that hasn't happened since we entered the 20s. So this can help with that. Thanks for making Locked On Tigers your first listen every single day. Shout out to the everydayers that do tune in every day. We will, of course, be back tomorrow as we talk about the second full day of winter meetings and everything that comes with that. I appreciate you all greatly. Peace and love. Going to therapy's dope, and I'll catch y'all tomorrow, baby. Go Tigers.